And we're live.
Excellent. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to first start by acknowledging that we're hosting this meeting on the traditional and unceded territories of the Sechelt Nation. I'd like to call to order the Committee of the Whole meeting for the District of Sechelt. It's Wednesday, July 14th, 2021, and it's 3:03. And I'll ask if we have any declarations of conflict. Seeing none, I would like to have a motion to adopt the agenda. Moved. Seconded. All in favor? Okay, thank you. And we'll move on to item 3, appointments and delegations. We have 3.1 Pat Hunt and Mark McDougall from the Sunshine Coast Resource Center, and they're going to give us an update on Volunteer Sunshine Coast. So I will turn it over to whoever's speaking first.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Pat Hunt and presently co-chair of the Resource Center Board. Been a board member since 2008. It's a long time, but not as long as Marge was. I'm here with Marge McDougall, and we're going to brief you on the status of Volunteer Sunshine Coast. In 2019, you generously voted to become a qualified donee on the Resource Center's application to the Sunshine Coast Foundation's Community Foundation's grant to pursue creating Volunteer Sunshine Coast as a social enterprise. And what you probably know is that the Resource Center does not have charitable status. To apply for a grant with the foundation, you must have either charitable status or a qualified donee. And so you generously stepped into those shoes, and we so appreciate it. And just a sidebar to that, we are at the starting gate of applying for charitable status. It is not an easy or short process, but it will happen. We were looking to start up Volunteer Sunshine Coast, which originally had been the Volunteer Center run by Community Service Society, as a social enterprise. The application was successful and $7,000 was received in June 2019 to wrap up by April 2020. Community Future Sunshine Coast also contributed $5,000 as a follow-up to our participation in their LEAP program. So Volunteer Sunshine Coast has 2 streams. The Pay It Forward stream, which is building organizational capacity, and that's modeled on Vantage Point Vancouver, which was the Vancouver Volunteer Center, and Volunteer Connector, which Marge will speak to, connecting volunteers and organizations. So here we are, a year later. How are we doing? Well, because of the funding, we were able to host a hugely successful not-for-profit capacity building conference and 2 follow-up workshops. Knowledge philanthropists. Now, with knowledge philanthropy, here's how it works with the Volunteer Sunshine Coast. And I'll give you an example of what I just did last weekend. You work with an organization to help them build their capacity, and most often it's in strategic planning. They pay a fee to the presenter, who then, as a philanthropist, donates it back to the Volunteer Sunshine Coast program. So we've been doing strategic planning workshops and consultations. And as an example, last Saturday, we did a strategic planning session with Driftwood Theatre School. To quote the organizer, Sandy McGuinness, the 3 members of our committee definitely felt the day was extremely productive and offered a solid framework for moving forward. I'm left with a feeling of great support, encouragement, and a more focused view of our next steps towards improvement for the theater, for the future of Driftwood Theater School. Now, I did a workshop with them 10 years ago. This was the follow-up. When the pandemic hit our services hard, the offices were closed, staff moved to work from home. Our volunteer program pivoted to facilitating communication amongst volunteer coordinators, connecting clients with agencies seeking or providing volunteer help, and resuscitating the database. I was a member of Mayor Seeger's pandemic emergency team, leading the volunteer action group. Now that we're opened up again, we're taking the pandemic learnings and refocusing Volunteer Sunshine Coast. Our executive director, Asia Hadzmilovic, hired in November, is an experienced volunteer manager and will be taking the lead on future planning for this program. We envision that the volunteer program will shift to recruiting, training, and activating volunteers for the Resource Center's information referral and seniors activity programs, as well as the Volunteer Connector program. Marge, you can jump in here. You're muted, Marge.
As my colleague Pat Hunt just mentioned, my name is Marge McDougall, and I have been a past board member with the Sunshine Coast Resource Center, and I'm currently a unpaid knowledge philanthropist for the Volunteer Sunshine Coast program. Since January 2019, I have assisted 25 nonprofit organizations on the Sunshine Coast to set up profiles and post for volunteers on the Go Volunteer online platform. The COVID-19 pandemic presented unique challenges to volunteering throughout all nonprofits. As a result of the pandemic, membership fees were waived. This year, I'm assisting the same organizations transition to the Volunteer Connector online platform, which is proving to be more user-friendly and providing more data to not only the Resource Center as the regional host, but also to the organizations. I will be meeting with Resource Center staff in the fall to discuss options for Volunteer Sunshine Coast ongoing, an example of which might be a storefront presence at the Resource Center for volunteers and agencies looking for volunteers to discuss their needs. This would run in conjunction with a Volunteer Connector online platform. This might be the best of both worlds, personal and virtual connection. Back to you, Pat.
So to be frank, we started this conversation looking at Volunteer Sunshine Coast as a social enterprise. Unless something remarkable happens, Volunteer Sunshine Coast will never be a social enterprise. This doesn't mean that there isn't a need for organizational and volunteer support and connection, but rather that the dream that there would be fruitful income streams that could support this program can't be realized with the time and leadership resources at hand. I'm not discouraged as part of the LEAP program, only about 25% of the proposed social enterprises actually are successful, Davis Bay Tea being one of them. However, the Resource Center is committed to supporting volunteerism on the coast, and we'll cobble together the volunteer leadership and funding to keep it alive. Thank you for your support. The District of Sechelt supports the Resource Center and the programs so deeply, and we are grateful for that support and for your time. Do you have any questions?
Thank you. Does any of council have any questions?
I can't have been that clear.
Mayor Seegers?
Thank you. Thank you for what you do. We couldn't do what we do in the community without support from organizations such as yours. I guess one of the questions, when you're talking about potentially having a storefront, what would you envision that would look like?
No, that's a good question. At this point, because we're, as you know, we share space with Fuse, it could well, and Marge, jump in here, but it could well be that we would have a volunteer who would have appointments with either organizations or individuals who want to have a conversation. Marge, do you want to expand on that?
That was similar. I know we're coming at the moment out of some of the COVID protocols, but it would probably be like on an appointment basis, which I think originally the storefront at the Seaside Center where Community Services had the volunteer center, I think people could just wander in off the street and talk about their volunteer needs or volunteering. Whereas I think as we transition towards how everything's going to work well, it would be by appointment, and they would meet with possibly myself or someone else that would sit down with them certain period of time. I'm saying up to half an hour perhaps, and we would take down what they want to do and see if we can match them up with organizations that we already know about. So that's what we mean by storefront. By appointment, people could come in face to face and talk about their volunteering needs, which I've always felt would work well with an online platform, because not everybody wants to use an online platform for volunteers. They want to talk to a resource center like agency and talk more, because I think Pat had the experience where one chat about talking to a volunteer led to something completely different that they really wanted, and that's where they hooked in. So the in-person can really cover off a lot different aspects of volunteering that the online platform can't. Or I mean, it does. I mean, it's very comprehensive, but in-person is always, you get off on different tracks and before you know it. So that's a storefront idea, but I think by appointment initially for safety, initially, until we feel more comfortable opening it up even more.
I think
that would be for the whole Sunshine Coast too, is that right?
Oh, absolutely. And what we've learned from managing through the pandemic and through the task force was we've got a much deeper relationship with the other volunteer the other organizations that have volunteering, whether it's hospice, community services, the band, whatever. And so those relationships can come into play where we wouldn't have had those prior to the pandemic. The other thing that we'll be able to do is Zoom calls with volunteers now. So you don't have to come all the way down from Pender Harbor to the resource center. We can facilitate that. I mean, in March last year, we didn't even know what Zoom was, for heaven's sakes. But now it's part of our life.
I see a question from Councillor McLean.
Thank you. So I appreciate all the work that you've done over the last several years, I guess, since the Resource Center took over the program. I think one thing that I've really seen as a strength that the service offers is connecting different organizations. I think people on the Sunshine Coast are already really engaged, and we have really high rates of volunteerism. But what we don't have great capacity within the community is working together. I see a lot of siloism. So different organizations working in different capacities, but on similar issues. So I'm wondering if that's something that's on your radar, and if you have any thoughts on how we can address that as a community.
Well, I think, Matt, to that point, you're absolutely right. Although we do work well together on projects, depending on whatever the project is. I think if we can bring to life the social planning council that we're talking about, the housing emergency, the housing action group is incredible. And those kinds of things are good. What was very successful back in, I think it was 2018, was the volunteer fair that we had. And there were about 30 volunteer organizations that were set up at the band hall. And people trooped through, and the organizations talked to each other and to potential volunteers and met new friends, met old friends. Sponsorship came in. So should we have the funding and the capacity to do that, then we can try that one. That was very successful along those notes. To even anticipate having a volunteer organization conference, in quotation marks, every couple of years might be a good idea.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Don't get me started. I'm writing grant application in my head.
Do we have any more questions from council? No? Well, I just want to say thank you very much for coming and presenting to us today. It's much appreciated.
Thank you, Janice.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so we'll move on to item 4, new business. I don't think we have any new business. Okay. Item 5, business items. We have reopening and communicable disease prevention policies. Can I have a motion to receive the report? Moved, seconded, all in favor? Okay, so I'll turn it over to Manager of Human Resources, Lindsay Roberts.
Thank you, Councillor Kuster, Chair. I am coming to you today with the change in our policies. So I brought to you a COVID interim policy back in 2020, and WorkSafe BC has instructed organizations to move to a communicable disease prevention plan, or you'll see at the SDRD they have guidelines. So this is a reflection of that. It looking to rescind the COVID policy and move to a long-term communicable disease prevention plan. And then further, just to bring you the work from home policy as well as the reopening plan. The reopening plan is an interim one, as you'll read in the report on the page, both in the RFD and discussion. On the second page, on page 4, just to let you know that we'll bring a new report to council once we've looked at the data of the hybrid working from home and work in the office plan. That's kind of the gist of it. I can go through all the policies one by one. Just not sure what would you like me to do, Chair?
I guess I'll ask council, do you have anything you want to hear, or do you have specific questions that you would like to ask Lindsay? Would you like to go through point by point? Have we all read this?
I'm happy to do a summary too, and then if there's questions, does that make sense?
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll start on page 5 with the communicable disease prevention plan, and this is a council policy. And the big changes are obviously the language around communicable disease instead of COVID. So we're looking at all diseases. They talk about the norovirus, and this is all WorkSafe BC language that has been adapted for the district. The main changes that we have created within the office, and we will talk about that in a further policy, but is the similar to the province in that there is reduced mask use that's no longer mandatory, and our physical distancing has changed. And for this policy, we're looking for the employer to make sure that there are hand hygiene facilities, making sure there's a clean environment, reminding staff to wash their hands regularly. So just increase signage, and that's again something that will stay permanent. And ensure building ventilation is adequate according to provincial standards, and support employees to receive their vaccinations, especially now we're creating time and space for employees to go do that, and then being mindful that there might be symptoms afterwards. So allowing for staff to get their vaccines. During a period of elevated risk, the employer must follow direction from the medical health officers and the regional health authority, ensuring that all workers are aware and must stay home when sick. And that's if that they can continue to work if that is an option for their role. And that's a nice new change that we haven't had previously. So it should encourage folks to stay home if they are ill. And just to adapt and change organizational measures and practices and policies as necessary, like you saw with the COVID pandemic. Ensure workers are supported to raise health and safety concerns through regular education and reminders. So for employees, we're just asking for them to stay home, as mentioned in our expectations of them, leave work if symptoms develop, return to work when symptoms have subsided, where to call if they need help, avoid touching eyes, nose, mouth, unwashed hands, regularly clean high-touch surfaces, and avoid close contact with persons who are sick. And then it just talks a little bit about the washing of the hands. And again, this is, something that it's quite common knowledge that COVID's brought to the forefront. And so this is something that we'll be keeping permanently as policy of the district. And then it talks a little bit about absences from work. They have access to their paid sick leave. They are permitted to be off if symptomatic if they talk to their manager and director, and work from home. And a medical note is still required after 3 days of sick leave. That's in line with the collective agreement as well as our exempt policy. And that's about it. That's that policy. Does anyone have questions about that one?
Doesn't look like anyone has questions.
Okay. Moving on. Page 8, we're looking at the communicable disease work from home policy. So again, there's similarities you'll find from the interim COVID policy to this one. And the definitions, we're looking at the non-essential and essential. So quite quickly we found during COVID, there were employees that really needed to be in the office. And it could change over the years. So we're not giving examples, but someone like bylaw is coming in to make sure that they're in touch with the public as well as reception. And so that just outlines that definition. So those folks that can work from home, there is an option to do that. And this policy is just making sure that people still are protected with WorkSafe DC. So making sure they have the equipment they need to successfully work from home. I'll run through the work from home guidelines. So employees will be available during regular working hours. So there'll be a report that will go out to all employees, just talking about this in specifically the changes that we need to make moving forward. So there has been some varying hours of employees, and we're trying to make sure that we're always available to the public. That said, we're going to make sure that this is tightened up in a work from home policy. So regardless if your hours are adjusted, we need to make sure that folks are available from 8:30 to 4:30 during those working hours. Our data shows from the employee survey that people have been feeling more productive than they were previously. And I do believe that there has been a positive impact on our work from home plan, but we need to make sure that the taxpayers are feeling that and are able to access us. So we'll be making sure that people are available during working hours, or continuing to make sure of that. And the objectives and expectations will be discussed and agreed upon with the employee and supervisor, and may be modified from time to time. So for example, right now we're going into a temporary hybrid model before the next stage comes out, so that we can trial having more folks back in the office. This is a little bit of a sticky situation with the masks no longer being mandatory. There are different, as much as it's safe and I'm backed by WorkSafe DC, there are other factors at play, such as mental health. So we're just looking to be mindful of our employees, and also be productive, and make sure that our service to the community is there. And let's see. In the event there's not enough work that can be done from home to fulfill a regular work schedule, employees who have been approved to work from home will be eligible to use personal time, vacation time, or bank time as requested. That was previous. It was mostly because of COVID and not knowing how that was going to work. But it's sort of a standard line for anyone. If you don't have, if you don't have work, you need to be asking for your supervisor for work, or that's time to take a vacation. Everyone is gainfully employed here, and we want to make sure that everybody's 7 or 7.5 hours a day is being use productively. Employees are expected to attend meetings by alternative means if they are not working in the office using technology available. And we may require in-person meetings as well. Working from home arrangements may stop at any time or require a rotational schedule. And again, that rotational schedule is what we're moving into right now. Reporting and safety, employees must check in with their supervisors once per week as agreed upon, and that's been working really well through the pandemic, and we'll continue doing that during this hybrid model. If the employee is working alone at home, the employee must check in with their supervisor at the beginning of each day. Employees may check out for a period. They need to leave the home, for example, on a personal matter. However, if beyond a regular scheduled break, this must be approved by their supervisor. Again, we're just trying to mimic the environment that we have in the office to ensure that it is, we are responsible and productive and available to the public. The employee is responsible to ensure the home office meets the employer's normal workplace. That was due to COVID. We wanted to make sure that everyone had exactly what they need, but we also need to make sure that people, if they are working from home, are doing so safely. So there is a little bit of flexibility in this language, and that's done purposefully. Employees working from home for the periods of time worked are covered for work-related injuries, and that's arising out of performing their job duties at home. And then we talk a little bit about family responsibilities. And again, this was initiated because of COVID, but is going to carry on. So we need to make sure that folks that maybe are working from home, the expectation is that they are working and that it's not just due to childcare. Arranging to have a dedicated safe space. Equipment and furniture. This is kind of a long form version of what we just discussed. So just making sure that people have ergonomically sufficient furniture, and most of this shouldn't really change. We've all been working from home that can work from home over the COVID pandemic. So this is a lot of this is for new employees. I would just like to be an equitable employer. So if I'm bringing someone in and saying, you can work from home 3 days a week, they need to be able to have the same opportunities as other folks. And then, yeah, forwarding their desk landline, I'll just speak to that too, just to ensure that people are able to get in touch with folks at home. Forwarding their landline to their cell phone home or their home phone is imperative, just to make sure they're available during those working hours. It's not listed. I was going to talk about something else. We just need to, yes, make sure that we're available. So we're going to eliminate the do not disturb from people's teams. That's just something that people have been doing to make sure they can get their work done. But again, that wouldn't happen in the office. So we're just trying to make sure that we're accountable and mimicking the environment here. And this even more specifically talks about technical support and then confidentiality. So that certainly came up over the COVID pandemic, what files are being used at home and making sure that files don't leave the office. So it's fairly easy now with things mostly being online, and then any work that needs to be done in the office, our records technician has to come in weekly to tend to records that never leave this facility. So that one's been fairly easy. And that is it for the work from home policy. Any questions?
Any questions from council? Mayor Seegers?
Thank you. So this is actually a temporary policy at this point. Is that correct? Because it talks about on page 9. So an opportunity to work from home for up to 3 days per week. Right. So that's to help us transition. Right. We have staff just as everybody else does in the community. We have staff who have been working from home and are now needing to transition back to work. So it's kind of an interim measure at this point, but we're anticipating it's probably going to change again in September. Is that correct?
Well, that will be a conversation for September, I believe. The reason it's there and that it was not an interim policy, which could be a discussion we have for what we choose to adopt here today, is the flexibility in that language. So it is an option. There's flexible language in our collective agreement, but this would be a standing district policy so that we have the availability to work from home. I know, and this will be something I'll talk about more in September, and I'm happy to have that conversation today as well. It's just our retention and moving forward for employees when we have organizations moving to this hybrid model permanently.
Right, but we're also looking at where do we put everybody?
Yes. This
So
is why
looking at all of that kind of stuff out too, yes.
that's correct. And so this is an easier sell right now because we simply don't have the space, but we're working on that, and especially making sure that people have safe spaces. And again, you know, with the regulations of WorkSafe BC coming out, and then as well as our provincial health officer, it seems like, not seems like we have a safe place to work right now, but just to, again, to up that anxiety of folks that are coming in for the first time, maybe we're just making sure that we have space for them that is closed off and feels safe for this really short interim period.
Yeah. So you'll be coming back in September and just giving us an update as to how it's going, if there are any changes proposed or anything like that, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the reopening plan, but I'm looking for that September 7th stage change to see what they come out and say, but we will have the month of data working in a hybrid model. So we're looking to go, I'm sending an email shortly for any staff who are watching this. On August 3rd, we'll be moving to 2 days a week in the office.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions? Oh, perfect.
Okay, I'll move to the reopening plan. Okay, so again, there was a reopening plan during COVID, and this is to be in line with our communicable disease prevention plan and our, as we just mentioned, moving back to in the office and changing our operational hours. So yes, again, we talked about the non-essential and essential employees. This was not really in effect for our essential employees as they have stayed in the office. And I just changed my screen now. The word's really tiny. 1 minute. I think I have this memorized. This policy is for employees to ensure the district meets the operational needs of the organization, council, and community. All non-essential employees will be provided with an option to work from home for up to 3 days per week. And so again, as Mayor Seegers just mentioned, that is written in this policy, and we will be moving to that on August 3rd. All non-essential employees who choose to work from home in this hybrid model must be in their workplace during operational hours at a minimum of 2 days per week. And that is it. So yeah, it does read very interim. Yes, this is the one that I'll be bringing to council as a new report. And so I'm not sure what the language will look like, but it will also come with data and a discussion.
Okay, is there any questions on the last reopening plan? No? Okay. Can I get, I guess, a motion for the recommendations from anyone? Mayor Seegers?
Sorry, question. I think I saw something in here. When would these come into play? When would they come into effect?
Yeah, so I believe
I thought I saw something in here, but I can't see it now.
I meant to have the date of today, so that's something to make sure before I say that out loud. I've lost them.
Madam Chair, just to clarify, was the question, when will these policies come into effect?
Yes.
Actually, technically, they will come into effect if council adopts these committee recommendations at the next council meeting.
Right.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Then I'll move the recommendations as presented on page 3.
Do I have a seconder? Seconder, all in favor? Excellent.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Okay, I think that's it for our list. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Moved, seconded?